Today, I'm delighted to speak with Sue Hershkowitz-Coore. Sue is the author of 2 books, and Sue is an amazing speaker on power writing, using the right words when you are writing with somebody, exchanging through email or LinkedIn. She's a fabulous speaker, has been all over the world, and I'm sure you're going to learn a lot listening to Sue Hershkowitz-Coore. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. And today I am extremely happy to finally having catch 1 hour of her busy calendar. She's an author. She wrote 2 books on writing, on using the right words to convince the people you interacted with. She's an amazing speaker. I don't know in how many countries she's been speaking in the world. And there are basically 2 types of people in our industry: the one that she knows and the people that know Sue Hershkowitz-Coore. Sue, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much, Eric. And actually, isn't that funny? Because remember when you and I met in London?
Yes, in the plane.
There. Yeah. You taught me how to use Uber.
Oh, really? Well, I do remember that I think I was in Singapore one day and I saw your book.
Yes, thank you. And I think you sent me a photo. Yes, I still have that photo. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so thank you so much for taking the time. And before we get into that, I always like to understand a bit, what is your journey? Where are you from and what gets you into the speaking industry, the meetings industry? How did you start?
Yes, thank you. So my authentic story is that my son was born. I was teaching school. I was teaching 7th and 8th grade. I loved it, English, which is really all that I do now, teach English. Michael was born. I wanted to figure out how I could spend more time at home with him. And I thought, well, if I could keep 7th and 8th graders engaged, keeping adults involved would probably be easier. And I just started knocking on doors. Everybody said, go away, little girl. And then I'll tell you this really quickly. Somebody did interview me, but I realized back in the day, I wasn't wearing stockings, and that was a rule at the bank. And also I had brought this flip chart so that I could demonstrate what I was talking about, but they had no easel. And we were in a room this big. So I had to put the flip chart on my lap, Eric. And then I became so panicky because I felt so unprofessional that I'm like craning my neck out to read my words because I totally forgot everything I was going to say. At the end of it, they did hire me. And a few months after that, I said to her, why? Could I ask you, why did you hire me? And she started laughing. She said, what you lacked in professionalism, which was everything, she said, you made up for in enthusiasm. She said, we agreed we weren't sure when you would get it right, but we knew that when you did, we'd love it. And every single job has been somehow as a result of that. My company, we've never done outbound marketing. We follow up leads scrupulously. But every single thing has somehow come from that original presentation. That's a good enough story, and that is the truth.
That's amazing. Now, I don't know about you, but I had no idea growing up and going to the studies and everything that there was such thing as a speaker career, let alone association and people hiring speakers. So how did you learn about it?
Well, that is correct. NSA was headquartered, National Speakers Association, which I really credit for teaching me the fundamentals. It was an amazing association for me. And they were headquartered here in Tempe. I live in Scottsdale. And so I think I just ran into people who somehow told me about it. And I probably put off joining and eventually did. And it was probably the best investment I ever made in my career to learn from other people. But you're right about the speaking. The very first time, I could never explain to my own parents what I did. And when they came and they heard me speak the first time, they were like amazed, and I was like amazed. It was, but you're right. That was not anything when we started that you thought you could make a living. And just to tag on to that, I gave up teaching. And then I couldn't pay my mortgage. And I called my father and asked him for a loan. And he sent me $1,000. But he said, Sue, he said, it's really time for you to go back to get a real job. So, and there are lots of stories like that, but that's probably not what your audience is most interested in hearing. But he did one more. When Dun & Bradstreet came to me, major seminar company out of New York, they asked me to come to be interviewed. They had heard about me. That's another story. And I wanted to go, but I was going to need more money. And my father, because who could afford the ticket? And I called and my father said, he said, I ran a very small printing company, but if I wanted somebody badly enough, I would pay for their bus ticket or their plane ticket. He said, you can say yes, I will lend you the money. You're making a mistake. And that was the hardest thing I ever did, calling them back and saying, I checked my calendar. I'm not really going to be in that area. Of course not, because I was just being at home. And I said, but when you're ready to consider me seriously, please let me know. And an airplane ticket will get me there. And it was a very long 2.5 weeks. They called me back and they said, if you can come within the next 10 days, we would love to fly you out. Well, I could have come that afternoon, but I did say, well, let me check. I'll get back to you. And then probably 2.5 days later, I was on a plane and meeting them.
That's amazing. And now, is that because of your involvement? When you said NSA taught you the basics. Is that where you hear that you need to have a book?
I might have heard that. Actually, I take it back. It was a long time ago, and I'm confident that I heard that you need to have a book. I heard a lot of things that don't necessarily ring true for everybody. Mm-hmm. I was told that if I didn't get rid of my New York accent, nobody would ever hire me. Well,
what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Exactly, bro.
Says the guy with no accent, of course.
I tried for months after that, speaking without an accent. I hated me. Audiences hated me. There was a total lack of authenticity. Yeah. But about the book, I really credit Larry Winget with an NSA buddy. Of course, I met him. So this is why it was such an amazing opportunity to belong to NSA. Do we have time for another quick story?
Of course.
Okay, so I was brought in as the big gun. I was the important speaker. The Oklahoma chapter of NSA was flying me in to do an hour. And Larry at that time lived in Oklahoma. He was the local speaker. They had 2 speakers at every program in Oklahoma. Well, I spoke. I did my thing. People, I guess, loved it. They all clapped. It was great. And I was done. And I sat in the back of the room and I listened to Larry. Larry spoke. And what he said was, if you don't have a book, you're stupid. Stupid. This was just after I finished and had no collateral to sell. And he said, and this is how you write a book. And he went through the steps, boop, boop, boop. And he said, write down 110 ideas that you have. Just write them down and then come back and flesh them out. And when at the break, after Larry spoke, he must have sold, I have no idea how many hundreds of dollars worth of product and books and T-shirts and mugs. And I'm thinking, he's right. You don't have something, you're stupid. And on that flight home, I got 102 ideas out. And that was the beginning of my book, Power Sales Writing, which, by the way, nobody published. 42 rejection letters later, I self-published. And then an agent saw my book, contacted me and said, would you like to be published by McGraw-Hill? No.
Right.
Right. And then again, they came to me to do an updated second version. And then because of that book, it was called Penguin back in the day, now Random House, Prentice Random. They invited me to be part of a series. Mine was How to Say It to Sell It. The series was a how-to series for business communication. Mm-hmm. And it was a hugely selling series, and they invited me to do that. So, it was through NSA and directly that meeting in the Oklahoma chapter.
Amazing. And so I know you are some of your clients are the most well-known brands in the world. What are you teaching the salespeople in those brands that you would like to share with us today that could help people listening to you now?
Yes, thank you. So Believe it or not, still customer centricity, that everything needs to revolve around the customer. You would think that people would get that by now. They actually, in their heart, they believe that they're communicating from the other person's point of view, and they're not. They're still feature dumping. It's appalling. But more than that, it's to move from transaction to emotional certainty. A brain-friendly messaging. Stanford did research, and this is the oldest research that I use because it's from January 2019. And I feel like I'm talking about the age of the dinosaurs. But I do believe that this still is true. They did fMRI studies, and they found that there's some words that ping positive neurons in our brain. There are some that ping negative. And then there's some, that expression, went in one ear and out the other. There are words that do that. And what we don't realize is how often very common words we're self-sabotaging. We're using words that are not brain friendly. And that's the level of writing to create emotional certainty. Would you like some examples of that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this one is going to drive everybody crazy. The word property. The word property has a negative ping, and I know that we all use it in this industry. But property, go ahead, visualize. Tell me, Eric, when you think of a property, what comes into your head?
A house.
Vacancy? A house? Okay, there you go. And is that, so if that's what, or maybe a vacant lot, maybe a dirty vacant lot. So what we have hotels, right? And we have venues and we have resorts. And now if each of those words, venue may be the most difficult, but hotels and resorts, those ping positive. We may not be visualizing exactly what they would like us to envision, but we're seeing something positive. And that's really critical. But I've been tilting at windmills with the industry on that one for a long time. And then there are other words, simple words that are just ugly, like the word execute. Events use this all the time. We're going to execute this event. No, what are you going to do, right? Put it up against the wall? You're going to deliver, right? There's going to be a presentation. And contract. That's a very difficult word. It pings every negativity neuron that we have. Contract, because it requires commitment. But an agreement, you can just hear the difference between one that's positive and pleasant and one that's going to contract, one that's going to take you in. So that's the basic level of creating emotional certainty, getting rid of words that are sabotaging you without you even knowing it. And if we were to move to a different level, it would be really creating excitement and focusing even more than on benefits, but on outcomes, customer-centric outcomes. And it's a very rare entrepreneur. It's a very rare business owner. It's a very rare hotelier, or even meeting professional who remembers, though they are the best at it, I have to say, I'm not sucking up, I mean it, that because they know that their stakeholders are waiting for them to sell this meeting, and they somehow figure out how to talk about what's going to be in it for the participants. Oh, that's another one. Attendees, not a good word to use. Attendees is just someone who attends. So now we can talk about, participants is the word you should be replacing that with. Participants or delegates, because participants participate. A delegate for international, but an attendee, nobody wants those anymore.
So podium or lectern?
Say it again, please.
Do you use a podium or lectern?
Okay, so now this is not brain friendly. This is correct or not correct. You're talking to an old English teacher here. A podium is something that you step on. A lectern is something you stand behind.
Yes.
End of story. I know no research, but I do know what's correct, which is funny because that really brings us to another point about email and using email etiquette and what's right and what should be used. But I'll let you lead the interview.
No. Please listen. There's no interview. Here's a conversation, and the goal, as I mentioned to you, is to have your knowledge and share your knowledge with people listening. So by all means, any points you think about, feel free. And actually, that was leading to the the next question I was going to ask you, which is linked to email for sure, maybe not only, but I've heard so many times, and coming from Belgium, that basically the UK and England and the US are two countries separated by the same language. And not only that, but I would remember working and having my corporate event agency in Belgium. If I would send an email to the US, I would always start, "Hi, Sue, how are you? Hope you're having a good day. I'm coming back to you regarding the RFP I send you. Would like to have some feedback." And if it was the other way around, it would be, "Hi, any feedback on the RFP, question mark?"
Okay, but so tell me about your point.
The point is, what do you see and how do you advise people when they're sending emails in general, but also when they're sending emails between the US and another country in the world where they're having their event? But first, correct me. Let's go.
Oh, well, then I have to write that question down. You think I'm going to get into this? I'm going to forget your question. Okay. So UK, US. That's a much quicker answer, actually. The UK, US, you always honor the other, your recipient. Just like I'm in Pacific time now in Arizona. Who knows what time zone we're in? But it doesn't matter what time zone I'm in. I'm going to write to you in your time zone. You're Eastern. So when I'm suggesting a call, it's always going to be in your time zone. Just Great. If I'm writing an email early in the day, to me, 9 o'clock, it's noon by you, right? So it would be good afternoon, Eric. So I'm always honoring, and the same is true when we're communicating with different cultures and to honor what their expectations are. With that said, that doesn't mean that we have to go down a rabbit hole if we believe what they're doing is wrong. Like, I know that, and I've done, as you know, as you've already addressed, work all over the world. And if saying how are you is a cultural expectation, then you can go ahead and do it. You can, knowing that you're being quite strategic in doing that. But beginning an email with how are you is wasted real estate. If we're good friends, that's a whole different thing. Or if we're good friends, you don't need to pay attention to anything I'm saying because I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt no matter what. But anything short of that, to begin with, how are you? Well, if you really cared, you probably would have picked up the phone or made a Zoom arrangement or done something so that you could really find out how I am. So wasted real estate, you always want to begin with something that's going to matter to them, something that's going to set the tone for a positive email. And that's going to be dependent on your personality and theirs. But it could be something like, hi name or good afternoon. I do recommend using good morning or good afternoon because whether you're luxury or regardless, that will always be acceptable. Hi also works well, though there are still some uber luxury that find hi being not pleasant enough. Mm-hmm. So we're going to start off with good morning, Eric. And then my first words might be, what a great interview with Gus last week. Thanks. I'm already using tip A or whatever, and then move on from there. So now I've used some research. I've shown you that you have been enough value in my life that you're going to give me the theory of reciprocity. I've done something for you. You're going to give me something back. So that was what I had to correct in my little note that I just made.
Awesome. Great point. Thank you for saying that. Now, can you share a bit more about emails etiquette? And I don't remember precisely what, but I know that's regularly you post something about an email that you've seen and sometimes hilarious and people don't even realize what they're writing.
Yeah, thanks for that little plug. It's the email wall of shame on my Facebook page and not my personal page. So I think it's Speaker Sue HC is my business page. And yes, so whenever, and I get these 95% of the emails that I post, I didn't receive, but a former client or a friend will send it and say, thought of you, Sue, you have to post this or some variation of that because people don't understand. I mean, prospecting emails that start off with, Hi, Eric. My name is, and who cares what your name is? And hello, I can scroll down. I can read what your name is, which, by the way, is different when you're texting. If you text me for the first time and you don't give me your name, like shame on you, because what's going to happen? What do I text back? Who are you? Yes, that is what I text back. Yeah. Who are you and why should I care is what I really feel like saying. Yeah. What question was I answering?
About some example of what you post on your wall and the best practice for email etiquette.
Yeah, thanks. They're truly diverse examples, from prospecting to following up. There was one that the subject line was, "Is this a bad time?" ? Hello. Yes, it is. Delete. I read it because I felt so sorry for the person, and then I posted it on the wall. Perhaps that person will see it and realize that, to begin with, that type of negativity, and then the whole thing. His whole message was quite negative, and that's the other thing: infusing positivity, really creating authentic. Not everything is la, but no drama, making it as authentically positive as possible, because that's what you want your reader to have in mind as he or she goes to, with any luck whatsoever, give you the result, give you the action, take that next step that you're suggesting. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing, not having the next step or ending with something like, "Looking forward to hearing from you." Yeah, I bet you are.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you will, but I'm sure you are. So those are the types of things that I post so that everybody can, because as you just said, we don't even realize it. I spend my life, I'm like an email geek, right? So I spend my life doing research, finding out what really is working now. What resonates best for customers. So, and people are still using old examples. For some reason, as my hospitality business was quiet during the pandemic, fortunately, somehow, thank you, the AI industry found me, artificial intelligence found me. And so I'm using these examples from the SDRs, sales development representatives. They are still using examples from people who went before them and people who went before them and people who went before them. I'm expecting a biblical phrase to come out. They're using such old examples.
Well, talking about old examples, that was one of the questions I was planning to ask you. And I think it's ironic that I'm going to ask you that question the day, and we're recording the day after Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp went down 2 days later. But the question is, a lot of people say that email is dead. Why do you think of that?
I think that some people might wish that email was dead, but in fact, email has become more more important as a communication tool than anything. You can be slacking, you can be texting, you can be doing all sorts of things, but then there's almost always going to be an email thread. There's going to be a follow-up to this. How are you going to get people to listen to this? You and I can have a wonderful conversation, and I always love talking to you. However, how are you going to get that information out? You're going to do an email. And the same thing with anyone who's trying to sell. We're going to have to use email, and people are judgy about the emails that you send. They make all sorts of decisions about your competence or lack thereof. Grammar. We thought that grammar was going to go out, and in some texting, and again, when you're friends, it doesn't matter. And by the way, that is the challenge with texting, because once we start texting to a business client and we think that we have a relationship, we often cross the line from friendly to familiar. And unless we are authentically, legitimately on that level, that really is a turnoff to buyers. Using the letter U instead of the word you. Just little tiny things that really annoy people. Sending texts in the middle of the night. It could be daytime, your time zone, but then you wake up your client. Well, that's a good way to win friends and influence people, right? But going back to email etiquette. So people really do judge you by the language you're using, whether there are typos. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but people judge us the way we look and the way we speak. And email now, there's no tone. There was research, 30,000 people, 3 countries were involved, the US, Canada, and Israel, 30,000, both outbound, external and internal communications. And it was shocking that the tone, the correct tone, was understood. You want to guess? Do you think that the tone was understood, let's say 100% of the time, or 75% of the time, or 50% of the time, or 25%? What do you say?
Well, from the experience I have with friends, it depends the country. I would say if you use humor, probably 25%.
Even if you're not using humor, the answer actually is a little bit higher, so a little bit more positive than what you said. Our tone is understood correctly only 52% of the time.
Wow.
So that's like a roll of die. They're either going to, because here we are writing it, we hear our words in our head, we're smiling or not as we type away, right? And then they're reading it on their mobile device. They're doing 12 other things at the same time, and they're not giving you the benefit of the doubt. And so words that were pleasant to you are now coming across at 48% of the time incorrectly to their perception. And it has nothing to do with what you meant. It only has to do with how they're perceiving what you meant.
You know that what you say right now, right there, it's very scary because I'm aware of it because I'm a non-English native. So when you go into an exchange, I always prefer the phone. And I always say that to my team. Don't start exchanging with emails. You're having conversation. Pick the freaking phone because email is going to be misinterpreted. But what you're saying is people that are English native, even amongst them, is like 1 email out of 2 is understood the way it was sent.
Exactly right. And we have no knowledge of that. We think when people are asked, do you think, what percentage of the time do you think your correct tone is understood? They were saying things like 88, 92% of the time. At least they had a teeny bit of awareness that it wasn't all the time, right? So, it's really frightening. And that is job security.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't think there's any such thing anymore, but yeah, that's another debate.
Yeah, no, but I mean, people learning how to communicate and write in a way that's going to elevate their brand and write in a way that's going to extend their hand rather than all the time. I'm getting people, and I feel so sorry for them. I don't understand why I'm being ghosted. Well, because you wrote a lousy email. You gave me no reason to respond. You know, I have 78 other emails in here, and yours didn't pique my interest or motivate me or get me excited or create any sense of emotional certainty. And it's hugely important.
You know, the shortening, as you were saying, how are you? And they write it HOW, then are you. Like, I have sometimes this exchange with my daughter. Said, what do you do with all the time you save by writing like that?
That's perfect. Okay, I'm going to be quoting you on that. That is absolutely, I love that. It's exactly right. Yeah. What are people thinking?
I don't know. Sue,
she does get a pass.
Yeah, sorry. Right. Of course. on the etiquette part, what are your recommendations when you're writing an email versus when you're writing an email on LinkedIn, for instance?
Yeah, so the question, my recommendation about what?
Is there a difference? What are your recommendations when you're writing an email or when you're writing a message on LinkedIn?
Yes, well, it depends. If you're just trying to link in, then there has to be some reason for them to link in. Mm-hmm. So shame on people who just send that standard messaging. There really needs to be something like, going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, that there has to be some personalization. There has to be a moment or two of research, but not to invade my personal space. Don't be saying, now, if we were in the same fraternity, sorority, that's cool. But I mean, just because, I wrote something that I enjoy running, let's say, which I do. So for you to begin with running, that's my personal space. Don't go there. We can get there, but find something more. It's a business relationship. that you want to talk about. So what did I go back to blog posts and mention something about my blog post? You bet I'd be delighted to link with you, connect with you, and start a true business relationship, right? But people don't do that. And so it's really that that hyper personalization that's so important now, but not to spend, I don't want to give anyone an excuse to spend an hour researching. You could take 3 minutes and read their homepage and maybe one more page, or their LinkedIn, their about section and the company that they work for. 2 minutes, maybe not even, and you can personalize, customize the message that you're writing. So that's not a difference. You asked me about the difference. Of course, LinkedIn has to be shorter. We don't have time for anything really long. And we can't be selling. I mean, the point of LinkedIn isn't to sell. The point of LinkedIn is to start a relationship, and a relationship that's going to be helpful for everybody. And so how does that work? It's content creation, it's reposting, and it's reposting with insight. That's, just clicking like, and I am guilty of this. I know I am, but just clicking like does nothing for you or for the other person, unless you're like my niece who counts how many 397 likes, Aunt Sue. Yeah, that's good.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
But what your goal should be, if you're reposting something or if you're making a comment on somebody's post, your goal should be to that's when you want the likes. And that's when you want to start a thread. You want to be so insightful that people are commenting about your comment. That's how you're really going to get noticed. And that's how you build a true relationship.
Awesome. I can speak to you for hours, and I know that you're always in demand. So I'd like to end the conversation by asking you a question about being a speaker. So pre-pandemic, I think you were like over 200 days per year on the road, which is fascinating to me. I'm sure a lot of people will ask you, how do you become a speaker? How do you pick the topic you're going to talk about? What if you don't have a book? What is your advice for people that are thinking of starting a speaking career?
Yeah. So I'm so conflicted on my answer to this. And I hope I've been helpful to many, many beginning speakers. I feel like it has to start with where your passion is, what really matters to you, and then figure out a way to make that matter to the buyer. I am not one for saying, oh, look, there's a market. Now, that's not to say you're not going to morph yourself. I started in business writing, and then, of course, very quickly that went to email writing, and then just recently, then it went to LinkedIn, because email writing during the pandemic wasn't really such a focus. So there are things that change about the market, and I can truly say that I feel passionate about each of those areas, or communicating. So communicating from the heart. How do you do that when you're talking to each other? How do you do that on a sales call? How do you do that in an email? So my answer is really determining what your passion is first, and then determining what the outcome will be for the buyers. How will they benefit? And then for me, it was really knocking on doors and then following up. I knocked on a lot of doors. I sent a lot of letters with however much the stamp cost in those days. I made a lot of phone calls, and that's what I think it takes. The book is great. I think posting is more important these days than a book. And, I joked with you much earlier about saying, of course, to McGraw-Hill. In fact, I made less money selling my McGraw-Hill book because I had to buy my books back from them with my author's discount. Whereas when I self-published, I actually made more money, but it didn't have nearly the prestige for me personally of self. So you really need to determine what's important for you. Do I think that a book made my career? Absolutely not. Do I use my book that, like you introduced me as the author of 2 books, it does seem to be impressive to other people. Buyers really want to know that they're going to get content. Buyers really want to know that they're going to get something that's going to make them better. And your book might be a year old or 5 years old. So it's the constant creation of new content now that I think is going to be even more important.
Fabulous. Very wise word. Thank you so much. How do people get in touch with you?
Yes, thank you. Facebook, we talked about Speaker Sue. HC is my business page. LinkedIn is my big thing, though, and that's Speaker Sue or Sue Hershkowitz-Coore. I think it's Speaker Sue. And Instagram, Twitter, you name it. I'm all over. Easy to find.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon, whether on the plane or at the conference.
No, I can't wait, Eric. All right, you take care. Virtual hug.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sue, thank you so much for joining me today. Love our conversation and always love your enthusiasm and energy. Really, it's a pleasure to speak with you as always. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please go on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group, www.eventbusinessformula.com/group. Thank you.